Hello guys, how are you?
I'm Hardeep Singh. Welcome back to your own YouTube channel. IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test, and speaking, you can guesswork. Please guys participate in everyday listening and reading practice test to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon for the upcoming notifications. Don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams.
Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a male insurance agent and a female client who wants to make changes to her policy. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5. Good morning, Tauber Insurance Company. How can I help you?
Good morning. I want to alter my insurance policy.
Is that for your house, contents or vehicle?
My vehicle.
Can you give me the number of the policy, please?
Certainly, I have it here in front of me. It's ZQW 5009.
And what make and model of car is it?
It's a Mazda Marvel.
And what's the CC rating?
Sorry, what do you mean?
How big is the engine? Is it 1500 or 1800 cc, for example?
Oh, that. It's actually much bigger than that. It's 2500 cc.
Thank you. Now, I just have to ask you a few questions to verify your identity. What name is the policy under?
Heathcote.
Let me just bring that up on the computer. Yes. Can I just confirm your first name, please?
Well, my first name is Lisa, but I'm known by my middle name, Marie.
Right. I see both here, but Lisa is the one I want for ID purposes. And your date of birth, Lisa? I mean, Marie.
The 22nd of August, 1955.
Correct. Just one more question before we get started. Can you remember the password on this policy?
Oh dear, I didn't know I had a password on it.
Everyone has a password. Would you like to take a guess?
Possibly it's my mother's name.
And what would that be?
Sophia.
Sorry, guess again.
All right. Oh, I remember now. It's my grandfather's name, Jack.
Yes, followed by some numbers.
1897, right?
Correct. Now we can get down to business. What exactly do you want to change?
Well, a couple of things. Firstly, I think it's overvalued at the moment. Can we reduce the value by $5,000?
You mean bring it down to $15,000?
Yes, I'm sure it's lost quite a bit of value over the past year.
Done. Now, what's the other thing? Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Well, I want to add the name of another driver to my insurance policy.
Who is it?
His name is Samuel Michaels.
He doesn't have the same family name as you.
No, he doesn't. Is that a problem?
No, it shouldn't be, as long as he's over the age of 25. but we find it easier to get approval for family members.
Oh, he is family. He's married to my daughter. He's my son-in-law, and he's 28, in fact.
Good. And what would he be using the car for? Would it be business or social purposes?
Not really. You see, I've injured my right arm, and I'm having difficulty driving. It's not an automatic. I have to use the gear stick. And Sam, that is Samuel, offered to drive me to my appointments and so on. He's a good driver, and I feel safe with him, but I'd like to know that the car is still insured with him behind the wheel.
So that would be family reasons, then?
Yes, I think so. Will my premium go up?
No, as long as you can provide us with a photocopy of his driver's license. A true copy. You know what I mean. You'll have to get someone from the Department of Transport to sign it, saying that he's seen the original document.
I think we can manage that without any difficulty.
Oh, and while he's at the department, he should ask them for a record of any driving offences, demerit points, that kind of thing. Only for the last 5 years, though. We're not interested in anything beyond that, but it's important that he has a clean record for the 5 previous years.
Oh, I'm sure that won't be a problem. Is there anything else you need?
Just the date for when you'd like this to take effect.
Today, if that's possible.
Yes, we can issue temporary cover from today's date, but full cover won't apply until we've received the paperwork and it's been approved.
What exactly is temporary?
He'll be covered for 2 full weeks, but it will lapse after that time if there's any problem with his credentials.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear a counsellor from Health Services talking about confidence and goal setting. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello, I'm Jo from Health Services, and I'm pleased to be here talking to you today. You've come here today to learn more about gaining confidence and setting goals. How many of you are truly positive thinkers? Positive thinking is the key to confidence. It doesn't matter whether you are playing a sports match, facing an interview, or preparing for an exam. If you apply positive thinking, you will gain confidence. This is the secret. Positive thought patterns. Positivity leads to confidence, which, in turn, will optimize your performance. What is the one simple mental strategy that all confident people have in common? They concentrate on success. But don't they ever fail? Don't they make mistakes? What happens when things go wrong? The crucial difference is that they don't dwell on failure. Everybody makes mistakes. I mean, how else do we learn? Rather than giving up or becoming depressed, the best strategy is to register the mistake, note what went wrong, and determine what would have been a better way to act or what could have been done differently in order to achieve a more successful outcome. Then move on. Yes, erase the negative emotions. Allow those memories of defeat, frustration, or dissatisfaction to fade and move forward. Negativity erodes confidence. You need to put aside your disappointments and focus on successful outcomes. Oh, it's not that easy, I can hear you saying. Well, no, it's not easy to forget failure, but no one ever fails completely, so congratulate yourself on the areas where you did do well. Mentally replay the best bits, even if they're only a small part. Now, there are 2 more things you need to do. Firstly, rehearsal. Yes, you heard me. Rehearsal. Surely only actors in a play need to rehearse their parts? No, the truth is, we all need to rehearse. This is a surefire way to build confidence. Before the match, presentation, the exam, or whatever, imagine yourself performing successfully in that particular situation. And here's the second tip: look confident. That will always give you an extra physiological advantage. So you can see that mind and body work together on this. You have to think and act positively. Let's talk a bit more about how to look confident. If you have to overcome a challenge, get rid of that anxious expression and rigid posture, those downcast eyes and nervous gestures. Even if you don't feel very self-assured, you can still give the appearance of confidence. Stand tall, hold your head up, make full eye contact, and keep an open expression. Replace the frown with a smile if you can manage it. And those hunched shoulders? Relax those shoulder muscles. If you need to, take a deep breath and stretch to release pent-up anxiety and tension. What if you have to make a difficult phone call, for example? Nobody can actually see you, so does it matter what you look like? Yes, it does. Practicing positive body language will help you cross the threshold into a confident mood. Before we move on to talk about goal setting, it may surprise you to know that once you have set a goal in life, the brain responds with a burst of activity, which we experience as... That's right, happiness. And what happens when the goal is achieved? Yes, there is another burst of activity and another feeling of happiness.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
As you can see, the recipe for a happy life is to maintain a positive attitude and keep setting and achieving your goals. So, whatever your goal, whatever it is that you're aiming for, a new job, losing weight, giving up smoking, graduation, you need an appropriate, and by appropriate I mean achievable goal. That's the first step. The next thing to consider is motivation. How do you get going? Well, it's more likely to motivate you if you think of the rewards of success rather than focus on failure or what you might lose. So, you need to establish your incentives. After that, you'll have to work out the various stages and phases that you'll need to go through along the way and prepare for each one of them. If you're not naturally motivated, keep the targets small and achievable. But it really is important to ensure you collect the resources to accomplish the various steps. If you have performed that particular task before, you may already have the resources, or at least know where to get them from. If not, ask someone who has already succeeded. When you have got this far, the next stage is obvious. Yes, you have to take the first step. That's not quite all there is to it, though. The final thing is to remember to keep track of what you've accomplished. In other words, be sure to maintain a progress log. That way you can look back at your previous small successes and watch your progress along the way to achieving your goal.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
You will hear 2 college students reporting to their science class about a project they have done on an Australian animal called the Tasmanian devil. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi everyone. For our assignment on a native animal, George and I chose that unusual Australian creature, the Tasmanian devil.
Yeah. Actually, they don't deserve to be called devils, though they do have some strange habits.
Anyway, as their name indicates, they're only found in the wild on the island of Tasmania. You can find them all over the island, including in the southwest rainforests and in coastal heath areas, but they're most commonly found in the forests where there's less rainfall in the eastern and northern parts of the island.
In fact, they live any place where they can get shelter during the day and food at night.
Some of you may have seen one in a zoo. They're about the size of a small dog and are covered with short, soft, black fur with white markings on some parts of their bodies. An adult male can weigh from 5 to 13 kilograms and a female from 4.5 to 9 kilograms.
They've got a large head and neck with heavy limbs. They're called devils because of the terrible sounds they make at night. This has given them an undeserved reputation for being aggressive, whereas in fact they're fairly shy creatures. But this doesn't mean that they're tame or friendly enough to be pets.
And like kangaroos, they carry their young in a pouch. They have babies only once a year, and then about 20 are born at one time, but at that stage they're only as big as a grain of rice. The babies have a race to the pouch because there are only 4 teats there, and the mothers rear an average of 3 young annually.
The babies stay in the pouch for about 5 months. Then they're left in their nest or are carried on their mother's back when she goes out, and eventually they have to look after themselves at about 8 months. Then they in turn start breeding at the end of their 2nd year.
And around 60% of them die in their first summer due to the tough competition for food. The ones that survive can live for up to 7 years, which means they don't live as long as the average domestic dog.
No. And it's estimated that now there are between 100,000 and 150,000 of them altogether. They were almost wiped out by the early European settlers because they hated the devils eating their chickens, so the government paid people to kill Tasmanian devils.
And most farmers still dislike them. Their numbers fell so drastically due to farmers poisoning them or shooting them that it was thought that they might have become extinct. Then a law was passed in 1941 to protect them, and since then their numbers have grown again.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
Now we'd like to talk about some of their habits. They live alone in places such as hollow logs, caves, or in burrows underground, which they line with bark, grass and leaves. They usually move slowly and look clumsy when they move quickly, but the young ones are more agile and can even climb trees.
But one of the most amazing things about Tasmanian devils is how and what they eat. They've got incredibly strong teeth and jaws, so a large male can give you a bite as strong as a 50-kilogram dog.
But don't worry, they don't eat people. Some farmers complain about them taking young lambs, but their diet consists predominantly of animals that have already died. They don't get ill when they eat sick animals because of the digestive enzymes in their own stomachs that kill the diseases.
And they've got an undeserved reputation for being smelly, whereas in fact they wash themselves as much as cats do. They're nocturnal animals, so they go hunting at night, often travelling up to 15 kilometres and using their strong sense of smell to find food. They eat all kinds of animals, and they eat everything, including fur, and leave nothing behind except the largest bones.
Yeah, there can be up to 22 of them feeding off one carcass at the same time, and they're very greedy, noisy eaters. In all the excitement of eating, there's a lot of coughing, barking and so on. It's quite common for them to bite each other to decide who can eat first, who goes second and so on.
And they've got an incredible appetite. They can eat the equivalent of 40% of their own body weight in just half an hour, which is like a human eating about 25 kilograms of steak. And they make really good use of their strong, blunt teeth. When they're frightened, they show them by yawning, which is more effective than biting or barking.
But the only serious fighting that takes place is when they're looking for a mate. All in all, they're a fascinating little animal.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about exotic pests given as the introduction to a course on ecology and environment. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon. I want this afternoon, as an introduction to our ecology module, to offer examples of exotic pests, non-native animals or plants which are, or may be, causing problems, which might prove a fruitful topic for seminar papers later in the term. People and products are crisscrossing the world as never before. And on these new global highways, plants and animals are travelling too. Exotic plants and animals are turning up in Antarctica and on the most remote islands on Earth. For example, the Australian red-backed spider. It's made its way to countries fairly near home, such as New Zealand and Japan, as some of you may know. Well, it's also been found on Tristan da Cunha, which is a remote island thousands of miles from anywhere, way out in the middle of the Atlantic. Now, another famous animal invader in the other direction, so to speak, from England to Australia in the southern hemisphere, is the rabbit. This was in 1830, and it might seem less of a threat, but it became an extraordinarily destructive pest. The fact that rabbits increased so rapidly is perhaps more understandable when we remind ourselves that they had originally been introduced to England from continental Europe 8 centuries earlier. This was because they were regarded as a luxury food source, and in spite of having warm fur, they probably originated on the hot, dry plains of Spain, which of course explains why they thrive in the climate of Australia. A much less cuddly example of a pest introduced to Australia, this time from America, is fire ants. These are increasing and spreading very fast. Their huge nests can now be found in gardens in the city of Brisbane, and they are costing the Australian government a great deal of money in control measures. These were an accidental introduction, rather than a deliberate one, brought to Australia probably in horticultural imports or in mud on second-hand machinery. As a biologist and conservationist, I have become increasingly concerned about these matters. Exotic invasions are irreversible and deserve to be taken more seriously, even when they aren't particularly damaging. For example, something that is not necessarily a major disaster compared to other ecological experiments. In 1975, an Australian species of earthworm was deliberately introduced to the Northern Hemisphere, in Scotland, because they were bigger than the natives. The aim was that they would be more effective than native species, but in fact they don't do more for the soil condition than the smaller locals which they displace. Although they don't do a lot of harm, as far as we know up to now, this will probably prove to have been a mistake. A much more serious case, also in Scotland, as well as other countries, along with the latest victim, Iceland, is the New Zealand flatworm. This is a most unwelcome newcomer in these regions of northwest Europe. Basically, this flatworm came into these countries by accident. It's now been realised that it was actually carried in the plant pots containing exotic ornamental shrubs and so on, and as it eats local earthworms and doesn't benefit the local ecology in any way, it is a real pest. Next, there's a further instance, this time in the water, and it's come from Japan. It's a delicious but very fast-spreading seaweed, and is one of many exotic species, large and small, in the seas covering the rocks around Australia. Unfortunately, it is replacing indigenous seaweeds and permanently altering the ecosystem. However, to look at the situation from a business point of view, it is now being harvested and exported, dried, back to Japan, its original home, where it's particularly popular. So, sometimes we may find accidental benefits from apparently harmful arrivals. Well, you could say that world ecology is now going the same way as popular culture. Global music and fashions, food and drinks are taking over from local ones in every land. And in ecosystems, we find vigorous exotic invaders overwhelming native species and natural habitats. But can we find any examples of invaders which appear to be a problem and then find that in fact they may not be such a big issue after all? We might take as an example a native of Australia, the budgerigar, the most common pet parrot in the world, of course. Because there have been many escapes over the years, it is now to be found flying about in feral flocks where the climate suits it. So, these flocks of budgerigars have been getting very numerous in the southeast of the United States, particularly in residential areas. People have been getting quite worried about this, but it has been observed that the size of the flocks has diminished somewhat recently. The fact that they are smaller is thought to be due to the fact that new competitors for their habitat have arrived from other places. That's the last example for now. What I'd like you to consider is this. Is the planet Earth moving towards a one-world ecosystem? How far would it be a wholly bad development?
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
So guys, don't forget like, subscribe and share my YouTube channel and my Facebook page, IELTS updates and recent exams. For more updates related to recent IELTS exam writing test topics, listening, reading, practice test and speaking, you got guesswork. Please guys, participate in everyday new IELTS listening and reading practice tests to achieve your desired band score in your actual IELTS exam. For more IELTS material, visit my official website www.ieltsupdatesandrecentexams.com. The link is given below in the description. If you need PDF files of latest IELTS material, then please join my Telegram channel. So guys, please write your score below the comment section. Again, thanks for listening. God bless you all guys. Stay tuned, stay safe.